All right. Hi, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of Excess Exceed. I'm your I'm your ghost. I'm your host, deeply sleep deprived Gearface. It's going to be one of those episodes, ladies and gentlemen. This is number 90. We made it to assuming I can get through this lesson without dying. We've made it to 3/4 of the Exceed roster, and who better to shepherd in this milestone than my good friend Blue? Blue is here to talk a little bit about Vega today, and I could not be happier. Blue, thank you so much for being here.
Always happy. And by the way, I am well rested because my sleep schedule is inverted from a regular person's.
Yeah, and you're here to shore up all of the weaknesses that I bring to the table. And that's honestly the dynamic of the lesson in general. I dramatically reduce the average knowledge of about Exceed on the call, and you're here to bring that back up again.
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah. A couple disclaimers before we get started, as always. Number one, hey, you, audience, you should play Exceed for fun. We're going to be talking about playing Exceed to win on this show. Sometimes those things overlap, sometimes they don't. If they don't, if the stuff that we're talking about doesn't sound fun to you, you have my permission to not play that way. Instead, you should play a way that you do find fun. You'll have more fun that way. Studies have shown. Disclaimer number two, we don't know everything. I don't know anything. Blue knows some things. As we said, I bring the average down. He brings it back up. Even the stuff that Blue knows about, it don't take that to mean that Exceed is a solved game, and all the things that we're saying very factually and very matter of factly are completely true forever and ever till death do you part. Find your own lines of play with this character. Tell us why we're wrong. We're going to be saying things like always do this, never do that. Take it with a grain of salt. Again, Exceed's not a solved game. Tell us why we're wrong about this character. But yeah, with all that said, Blue, please, I'm dying to know a little bit about Vega.
All right, well, let's start talking about Vega then. As always, let's start with the character ability, although this character ability is actually only one piece of the puzzle for Vega. So what this says is that when you're at the edge of the arena, your specials and ultras are more powerful, literally more powerful, +2 power. Very spicy. And, if we glance at our powers, we can see that like a lot of them become pretty good when we add an additional +2 to them. And then Vega, similar to Geef, is part of the +3/+1 club. The Exceed mode is...
Those are really scary stats.
They certainly are. +3, same condition, same things that it applies to, specials and ultras, and it's an additional 1 power and 1 speed relative to basic mode, but that much power and then an additional point of speed is like pretty nasty. So like look at these like mid speeds like Flying Barcelona attack and Sky High Claw, and then if you append an additional point of speed to them, it's like, oh, this is suddenly on curve and hits for 9.
Right.
It's a scary thing.
It's gross. Yeah, that's way too much for a special. The way this is worded is a little bit weird because there's no there's no timing on any of the effects here. If I move out of the corner, my attacks still have the thing, right? Like I strike and the strike moves me out of the corner. With all of these many things that move me forward, I still have those bonuses, correct?
Yes, there actually is a timing. It's when you set your attack.
Oh, okay. If you're at the edge of the arena when you set your attack, they will continue to have that thing.
Yeah, they will have that for the rest of the strike.
Got it. Okay. So
all right.
This it tells me immediately that one of the things that I'm going to want to be doing as Vega is striking from the corner.
To some degree, you do care about positioning. In addition to having a bunch of shapes that are dive like, which means that you also care about positioning.
Right.
But what Vega actually cares about even more than positioning, in my opinion, is resource management. Vega is probably the Street Fighter character that has the most intense and most meaningful resource management out of the characters that we got in the season. He actually kind of interacts with his resources more similar to like a BlazBlue character, where he's extremely strapped. He has basically nothing, but what he does have, he can spend to directly turn it into killing you. It's a really exciting thing.
And he'll be able to afford 0.75 of the 10 great things that he wants to spend on, I assume.
Very close. I actually have prepared a graphic here. I call it the Vega Quadrangle. You can see that Vega is a star, and he's part of the constellation Lyra. And there actually is 4 things that Vega can spend his resources on, 4 main things. And in my opinion, when you're starting to play the character, you should commit to spending on 2 of those. You get to choose, and all of them are pretty fucking awesome. But you have to choose, and you have to commit.
I'm not
So
gonna.
you have to kind of play the character with a game plan.
Okay, that makes sense, and we'll get into sort of like weighing those things as we go. I'm not going to let it pass without comment that you are the first person to bring a graphic to an Exit Succeed lesson, and you have single-handedly raised the bar for all other experts to follow you. So they're all on notice. They
That's
have
fair.
to step it
I
up.
just figured that it would be easiest for you to remember this lesson if I prepared the old constellation graphics. You can be like, ah, yeah, Vega, Lyra,
The one with the
Quadrangle.
star chart.
Yeah,
No, I think it's a great idea. So, all right, yeah, let's get into it. I have all of these awesome things I want to spend my very limited budget on. Is a sort of general game, other than I probably want to come from the corner and strike a little bit, is kind of a general game plan going to emerge from these conversations, or should we talk about that first?
well, your game plan is to accrue resources, while also like setting up reasonable positions at the same time. And I think a good exemplar of how you do that is both sides of rolling crystal flash. So let's talk a little bit about that before I get into what the 4 points on the quadrangle are.
Yeah, okay.
Uh, so here's a card that's guaranteed to hit. It doesn't say that, but it essentially says that.
+1 speed for each space between you and the opponent. All right, so it gets faster the further out it is. This one actually doesn't have a timing condition. This is always active, right?
That that is always active, and that means it is always being resolved, which means this has very weird interactions with cards that care about the opponent's speed.
Oh yeah. Okay, so we can get into the. I'm sure that there's like an entire FAQ section of this guide. Like people have probably asked about this stuff many times before.
Yeah. This is the main one, but yeah, this card beats speed dodges. That's not actually a relevant property of it, but it is something to keep note of in your minds if you're playing as a character that is reliant on a speed dodge for defensive utility. Is you can't speed dodge rolling crystal flash under most circumstances, at least not with a traditional speed 5 or greater speed dodge. You have to
Right.
instead save that for something like Scarlet Terror.
It's just because its printed speed is 2?
Yes, and it closes 5, which means that no matter what speed it starts
Oh
at,
god.
it closes to range 1, where its speed it reduces as it closes in. So at range 1, its
Right.
speed is 2, and then any additional speed modifiers that you might have on it, like from your exceed mode.
Right. All right. So, okay, badly sleep deprived Gearface already has a headache. All right. So as you get closer to the opponent, your speed will decrease. Most of the time that doesn't matter because
Yeah.
by the time your before effect has gone off, your speed has already been checked. You don't care anymore. So
Yep.
for the vast majority of strikes, I can literally count the spaces between my opponent, add 2 to it, and that's my speed.
Yep.
Okay, cool. It also
So yeah,
it,
this is a ludicrously fast attack that is relatively safe and is basically guaranteed to hit. Uh,
I,
so lots of good properties for a character that wants gauge, because one of the main ways that we're going to be getting gauge is through hitting the opponent.
okay.
But this boost also is a pretty good way to get gauge.
Yeah, it says add this card to your gauge on it.
Yeah, so let's say you're in a position like this, with Ryu as our reference, where the opponent isn't in the corner and you can take the corner by moving 3 and passing by them. That's a power play. You
Okay.
set up stats and you give yourself resources at the same time. That is very, very efficient.
Okay.
And oftentimes I actually really like just boosting this to build gauge. Basically, as a copy of Key Charge, that thing that all the Street Fighter characters that have it really like.
Yeah. Famously, Ken plays. Well, Ken, actually, no. I was going to be flippant and talk about axe kick, but Ken would like to play key charge all the time, but it's on an attack that's too important for him to lose.
Yeah. Anyways, this attack is also pretty important, but it's not the only thing that actually occupies this spot in our mix-up matrix, because Vega is a very funny character. It is the cheapest thing that occupies this side of the mix-up matrix, which is a fast that hits at range. So, like, if you need one that doesn't require investment, this is your option for that. But you have other defensive options, and they're pretty good.
Okay. I'm also, excuse me, you said something, I think it's going to come up over and over again on this lesson, that for people who, like me, who don't know Vega super well, you said take the corner. And that is a new concept for old Gearface here, who, like, I know that zoners tend to corner themselves. I know that grapplers tend to hug the center, but for most characters, cornering yourself is something that you really don't want to do. Is Vega's character ability strong enough that dynamic kind of just inverts itself?
You're fucking right, it does.
Okay, so it's that important that I will just, my opponent is trying not to let me get to the corner.
I will note that you don't need to actively play for the corner very often. You only need this like once or twice a game on average. So as long as you can get it the once or twice a game that it matters, that's great. Anytime other than that, getting yourself to the corner isn't actually necessarily to actually confirm anything. It's a threat. Think of it as effectively boosting fierce, or in Exceed mode boosting
A boost that doesn't exist.
Yeah, it's the one on Raditz, a Saiyan warrior or something like that. It's a really dumb boost. Raditz is a custom, by the way.
So for the most part, I'm getting to, like, most times I get to the corner, you said it's a threat that my opponent is going to have to deal with. Are they just dealing with it by, like, throwing grasp at me to get me back out of the corner or something?
That is an option that can sometimes work.
No, wait, hold up. This works on defense. This is not a when you initiate thing. Okay, so yeah, this is that's a really scary thing that my opponent is doing if they're just throwing grasp into me.
Grasp does notably cover a lot of Vega's mix-up when he is in the corner, especially if he's not in Exceed mode, which is part of why my personal line with the character mostly involves exceeding, and exceeding as soon as possible, because his Exceed mode is really gross.
Okay.
I don't think that is strictly required, because Vega has a lot of really gross things he can do with you, to you, no matter what. So long as you're spending your resources to kill your opponent properly.
Okay.
But I think the Exceed mode is pretty gross, and it also means that your mix-up on offense and defense is ludicrous. The opponent basically has to play specific cards to beat your cards, and your cards cover every other thing that exists.
Okay. And what you're describing is a reward for getting into this position, but it also sounds like it's a reward for managing your resources well.
Yeah.
Okay. And are the two kind of synonymous, or is this something that you are trying to do simultaneously?
They flow into each other, but they aren't necessarily synonymous. Okay. You do have to manage both together. That's part of why cards like this the boosts like this are really useful for Vega, because it gives you
they do both
of what you're looking for.
Okay.
Which is why, despite this being a really cracked attack with a lot of really funny properties, I do also often just boost this.
Makes sense. Okay. When you're playing it as an attack, it seems like you'll know when you're going to do it. It's when you're a million miles away from your opponent and you need a fast option.
Yep.
Okay. And a really fast option at that.
Yeah. Vega's kind of a character that has like several internal 50/50s built into his kit. So this is the 50/50 with Flying Barcelona attack, which is low Vega shot, I guess. This hits for 10 when you're in Exceed mode. It hits for 9 when you're not in Exceed mode. It hits ranges 6 to 8, which is a absolutely hilarious range band for an attack to hit at.
Yeah. And that really, like 6 to 8 is unprintable, right? Like nobody has an attack that hits at 6 to 8, because that's not a range that reasonable Exceed characters or regular Exceed characters are ever going to occupy. But because I have this, and because of the dynamics of my character, I might actually be able to threaten this fairly regularly.
Not regularly. This is like a once in every like 2 or 3 games. If you do land this, the opponent just fucking dies. So it does have that nice property.
Yeah, hit win the game is pretty good.
Like turns out most characters can't actually handle eating a 10 power attack.
Yeah, I noticed though, as you're talking about this blue, you're sort of implying that I'm doing it from the corner by default.
Yeah, you don't play this unless you're in the. I guess there's technically really funny mix-ups that you can play where you don't play this from the corner, but I would not recommend doing that because this attack is really bad if you don't play it from the corner, even if you do crit it.
Okay. All right, you were talking about internal mix-ups. This is something that like these two attacks enable each other. They cover similar range bends, but this is clearly a really brutal mid-speed slow type deal. This is absurdly above curve, as insofar
Yeah,
as the speed curve even exists at this range.
yeah, and they form a mix-up with each other, and also notably they give you your mobility boosts. So here's Advance 8, just on a special boost, Advance 8.
Yep, for free. Um,
Yep.
Nobody else that I can think of has anything like that. Like, who has Propeller Knight has Fly Up, right? And that's like a one force ultra boost that does this.
Yeah.
So
So Vega has some oddly privileged tools because his kit is very jankily shaped. So here's your two like extreme range options. This one Rolling Crystal Flash is also good in the mid range because just do the math on it. If you add 3, which is the number of spaces between you and the opponent when you're at range 4, where the game starts, this is a 5 speed attack at range 4, which like that is the start of it being a good attack, speed wise.
I'm also seeing hit push 3. So I have a sort of weird opening move don't move, not move don't move mix up, but dive. My opponent can't just mash sweep into my dive because this will push the sweep out of the way.
That is true in positions that are not literally the opening of the game. The opening of the game starts
Oh,
here.
right,
The opponent gets pushed to, and they trade with the Rolling Crystal Flash. Still,
right. There's a number of spaces on the exceed board, and then there's a corner. I
yeah,
see.
yeah.
Writes down there's a corner. Okay, but
Did
so
you did
in
you
other
corner
positions, it's a legitimate mix up with dive. That's
Yeah,
a relevant thing that it can do. Otherwise, is the push just to maintain space because I want to maintain space because all my stuff is a big dive like thing?
probably. I don't know. I mostly don't think about it.
All right, fair enough. It's when you're using it, what you're using it for is that it's really, really fast.
It's really fast. It confirms power, a thing that our ability gives us. It keeps the opponent honest. It pretty much hits guaranteed. Lots of great
It
things that
gives us
Vega
gauge
appreciates. Yeah.
because it hits guaranteed. Okay, I get you.
So this is the like extreme range mix up with this one also having viability at range 4. Technically both of these are viable as openers in that they exist. But like this is basically just the property of I am going to hit you and I don't care what happens otherwise. And this one is I am being absurdly cheeky, bottom text.
Right.
So let's look at the more relevant side of the mix up since both of these are especially about Flying Barcelona attack, is basically like the dream. It's the low tiger shot of Vega's kit. It's not actually an attack that you get to play very often because it turns out when you have an attack that reads if I set up range, the opponent fucking dies. They usually don't let you do that unless they
Yeah,
just don't care about winning anymore.
they won't do that. And also, seems like a very just playable anytime boost. So, how often are you
Yeah.
even going to have this in your hand to threaten?
The funny thing about this boost is it sets up the attack itself. Usually, so you actually do want to be careful about how you're spending this attack. You are mostly going to be like you have to ration it. You probably are going to boost wall leap just to leave once because forcing the opponent to react to you being in the corner and also away from them is pretty good. Um, just from a like resource management perspective, like forcing them to have to come back in because you still have a relevant threat at that range is like pretty good.
From all the way across the board, they've got to spend a lot to get back to you. Realistically, are they like how? I mean, when you're in the corner, you can be really, really scary. So it might not even matter how much force they're spending back to get back to you. But if you do that, like if you do one of these, like boost this, run to here, is my opponent does he have to get to here to be safe? Like at what point is he actually like is he spending to?
I would recommend spending to get to range 3 at least. So, 1, 2, 3, 4 force at
Okay.
least. Range 2 is in some ways better, in some ways worse. Range 3 is like reasonable. It's where like Vegas mix up is just a super intense version of a regular character's mix up.
Okay.
So like and because you're spending resources, you probably don't want to spend too much because those are your cards to answer the mix up.
Sure. Okay, that makes sense. But like that's the dynamic is
Yeah.
my opponent cannot allow me to exist here because I will kill them.
Yeah,
So
pretty much.
so they will move in to a reasonable distance, which is something like here. And now we can actually play a game of Exceed, but it's a game of Exceed where I'm still pretty advantaged.
Yep, because your mix-ups you're singing to the tune of like in basic mode 5 power 6 speed attack or a uh 8 power 3 speed attack, which are some pretty mighty copies of Assault and Spike that we're rocking. Anyways, let's talk about those cards: Scarlet Terror and Sky High Claw.
Yeah.
And
So what do we got
also,
here?
while we're here, Pounce is relevant for this as well, but Pounce is a card that I want to talk about separate to the mix-up because it's kind of an anti-mix-up card.
Okay.
Um, so here's a card that says I win. Oftentimes, like as long as you're fine with trading like 6/6/6 into sweep, or 4/4 into focus, then this card is basically, gonna do that. Like it just does that. It also is one of the most stable defensive options in the entire game, especially when you're in Exceed mode, because it's a 1/4 Dragon Punch that hits for 6 when you're in the corner. This is the kind of thing where, like, when I say Vega in the corner is a threat, this is the like, and you have to care about that part of that threat.
Right. Yeah, because like this is like you can't cross out. You can't like I guess you can block it, but like this is an unreasonable attack shape when he's in the corner.
Yeah, and to go with it is its unreasonable brother, Sky High Claw, which, as mentioned, is a 3 speed 8 power attack or a 4 speed 9 power attack. When both, I'm talking about these when they're crit. If you're playing these, you're probably playing them crit. You're playing most of Vega's attacks that have crits on them crit because they are pretty relevant and strong crits.
Okay.
That
And
that is part of Vega as a resource management character.
it's another gauge sink. It's another thing to spend your gauge on. We're also talking about them as though you're playing them from the corner. Is there any reason to play them when you're not in the corner?
Scarlet Terror is still a 6 speed attack at other ranges. So like, go for it, homie. Uh, if you find an instance where you need a 6 speed attack, play it, please. It's awesome.
Yeah, we just got done talking about Bang and Bang style Shuriken a couple of days ago. Uh, 1/4 speed 6 any power at all. It seems all right.
Yeah, and this isn't as good as Bank Style Shuriken, but being able to represent a speed 6 option on defense is pretty good. It's
Yep.
it's good on any character that can do it.
Yep.
And this one even, depending on board state, can beat Spike, which is pretty cool.
Yeah.
Sky
And
High Claw is mostly a corner attack. Notably, it has a pretty good boost on it when you're not in the corner for a lot of reasons. But I'll talk about that in a little bit.
okay. I mean, the comparison to Bang style Shuriken sort of breaks down when this does hit for 6 damage. Um,
Yeah, you do
but
give that to Bay.
yeah, but it's that's something that I get as a reward for doing everything else right.
Yeah, yeah. Like the reward for managing your resources and positioning well is that you get to throw a 6 speed attack, 6 or 7 speed attack that hits for above average power with a mix up option that hits for ludicrous power and is like on curve if you're in exceed mode, or only slightly below curve if you're not in exceed mode. And also pounce. You get pounce. Uh this is a card that you can play whenever because it's a 1/4 sweep.
Yeah, that's good. 1/4
You
sweep.
know,
2 of its guard is
you know all
armor.
those things. Yeah, you know all those things that are great about sweep. Well, here's one that doesn't lose to cross and has 7 delta in exchange for being a card you have to crit.
I think I can probably get over the pain and suffering caused by having to crit it. if I'm getting these stats out of it.
Yeah. It has all the great properties of sweep, but with the additional great properties of being a card that is a special on Vega. So you get awesome properties like it hitting for 7 when you're in basic mode, or it being 3 speed with 4 guard and hitting for 8 when you're in exceed mode.
That's an ultra.
That's an ultra. It's an ultra that's really hard to beat. It also means that you don't necessarily need to crit it in exceed mode because 4 guard actually is enough at speed 3. You can also crit it if you want. 6 effective guard is even better than 4 guard at speed 3. And this
Makes
is also
sense.
why, oh yeah, let me just like go to range 1 and play Grasp into Vega as a diffusal option isn't necessarily going to work because he has Pounce.
It might be an incredibly bad idea. I'm noticing this is his only card that has any sort of defense on it at all.
Yes.
Okay. And also, I mean, at this point, we've at least briefly touched on every special in the kit. I can look down here and see something very similar on here. Basically, everything that he's doing. This may forgive me if this is obvious, both Blue and viewers at home. Everything that Vega is doing is moving him out of his preferred position. Right?
Yep.
Like, here's a before close. Here's a before advance. Here's a close. Here's a close. Here's a close. There's a hit move effect. Here's a close. So I get to the corner. I do something awesome in the corner, and now I am no longer in the corner.
That is
Is that
usually true. And that is also why range 1 is not necessarily the best place to be because before close doesn't do anything when you're at range 1, which means
sure?
Vega can
He stays
continue
in the
to
corner.
be in the corner.
Yeah. All right. So that's actually really really scary for my opponent. They have to be pretty sure that they are moving me out of position with what they're doing, and it better be better than grasp if they're going to run into pounce. So the dynamic then, as we're evaluating all of these cards, is that I kind of get one per cycle or per setup. Where, yeah, honestly, I can make. Can I treat it sort of like a boost, but it's positioning instead of putting a card down? Like I
Yeah.
throw something really scary that I have set up, and then I lose it.
Yeah. Vega is actually like the archetypical payout zoner, and that he
Okay.
is literally a zoner. He cares about setting up range. He also cares about positioning more than a lot of other ones. And when he sets up the position that he wants, he cashes it out. And after he cashes it out, he needs to set it up again.
Okay.
Um,
So
M
so
Bison has similar properties, but Vega is much more extreme and obvious about doing it.
so contrast him to Axel or Sagat or somebody who is if they get you at range, the thing they get out of it is that they get to keep you at range by pushing you or something.
Yeah.
And then maybe compare him to like Mole Knight, maybe?
Well, Knight's
Who
another character who has that same dynamic of setup, payout, repeat.
yeah.
Mole Knight's more fluid with the way his setup works, but it is a similar gameplay flow.
Okay. So I can treat this as like and so when you said earlier in the lesson that you will probably get this ability and use it twice, maybe a couple times a game. Part of that is that I then need to do all the work of walking back over to the corner and setting it up again somehow.
Yeah, and that shit's expensive.
Yeah. Okay. And as you mentioned, so okay, I'm back where you were a few minutes ago when you said that the resource and positioning games feed into one another. Because
They feed into one another, but you do need to manage them separately. Yeah.
right. Because I can't get this once and keep it. I can't hold this position very effectively because what am I threatening with other than what's going to move me out of the corner? So some of my resources are going to have to be spent walking back into the corner or doing something to get back to the corner. I think I'm with you now.
Yeah.
Okay. Where to
All
next?
right.
So we've got our extreme range zoning, we've got our mix up, and we've got our probably just win the strike card.
Yeah. I guess I'll talk about these boosts first before moving on to the ultras. Pounce's boost you don't play usually because it's on Pounce. It does notably mean that you have an element of quantum positioning on the character where anywhere from here, here, or here, Vega can be in the corner if he has a copy of Pounce Live. This does mean actually that if you want to be really cheeky, you can open with Dancer Step, retreat 2, and then play like Flying Barcelona attack. And the opponent has to decide whether or not they want to eat Rolling Coastal Flash or Flying Barcelona attack from this position,
Yeah,
which is
that
pretty funny.
and when you say that that is a cheeky play and not a I'm mashing this every single time the game starts play, that sounds strong. But I mean, on the one hand, pounce another force and a card to strike with is really expensive turn one of the game, especially on a character who sounds pretty resource strapped. But
Yep.
also, I'm losing pounce.
Yep. And
Okay.
you are going to find that the opportunity costs on playing all of Vega's boosts, even before thinking about costs, is pretty real because you're giving up the ability for your ability to do anything by giving up these cards and playing them as boosts.
Oh, right, because it doesn't work on your normals.
Yep.
Okay, this is my ammunition. These are my payouts.
Yeah.
That I'm using to get anything done.
Yep.
So
And so
it,
you have to ration how much you're using all these positioning tools, and all of these are positioning tools, um, to position, versus actually having like bullets to shoot at the opponent when you're done
when
setting
you're done
yourself up.
positioning.
Yeah.
Okay, and so I can sometimes read this as retreat up to 2 +3 power +1 speed now strike or something like that. Like if I use it to get to the corner, I'm getting those stat boosts. I'm setting something up. If I'm not literally getting to the corner, is there any point in playing this?
I would probably say never. If you're not getting the corner, it's not worth playing, and it's rarely worth playing because you're giving up pounce anyways.
Right? Yeah, you would rather you would rather just get to the corner some other way if you possibly can.
Yeah, and
Uh,
even if that means passing turn, but this is a notable thing that the character has is, hey, like sometimes you have quantum positioning, and if that means that you can get a checkmate because by giving up pounce, you should probably do that. So like keep in mind this exists; it's really useful, but also it's on pounce, so like it's not going to be something you're going to be mashing every game most of the time.
okay. Makes sense.
All right, now let's talk about these two funny boosts. Retrieve. Um, so it's a expensive move 3 if you are not getting the benefit. With that in mind, you are mostly going to be playing to get the benefit, similar to high jump. Uh,
Right.
high jump, if you need a move of retreat 3 in a pinch, you can do that. I would probably not play retrieve as a retreat 3 because it's just too expensive. With that in mind, uh, grab any boost and put it into play, which means you are not paying for costs. That is relevant for claw, which we will talk about in a bit. But also, even aside from these equipment boosts that are really funny and also really awesome, uh, any continuous boost, put it into play. Light, fierce, defend. We got some pretty spicy options just off the normals. In addition to the positioning that we're getting, which is probably going to be take the corner with an additional boost in play.
Right. I would love
Pretty
+3
pretty
power +3
strong move.
speed. Oh, did I lose?
So like,
I'm
oh,
sorry, Blue. I think I we cut each other off. I'm sorry. Continue. I can cut that little silence out if we need to.
no, it's fine. I just said this is a very strong play for you to do. Notably, it does worsen your mix up because this is your close range extra copy of Spike.
Right.
But that's kind of fine because we have Pounce, which acts in a much the same way with regard to what it beats, and it's also a little bit safer. Um, but like don't count Sky High Claw out; it's pretty mighty. But the boost is really good.
Is this something that kind of like a lot of characters who have a stand-in for Spike or something that like a range one Spike or something like that? You will boost the first copy pretty readily, but you are really reticent to boost the second one or reluctant to boost the second one because the threat of it is so important, or because Pounce is kind of does what this does in terms of dynamics. It might be a little bit more free to boost. It's just that Sky High Claw is really scary.
Probably closer to the latter, but like you're Vega, you care about option management, positioning, and resource management. You're going to have to spend stuff that you don't want to spend at some point, and that does involve sometimes worsening your mix-up. And if you're going to worsen your mix-up, this is definitely the card to start with as far as that goes.
Okay, just because it does have a stand-in somewhere else in the kit.
Yeah, it has some redundancy. And also the redundancy is an effect that we're much more fine with giving up as well. Like Dancer Step is really strong. Retrieve is stronger in all likelihood.
Okay, that makes sense. Yeah, I mean, action compression is action compression. That's awesome. But in terms of spaces moved, you are getting more out of this one. You're getting a boost out of this one, which could be really, really messed up. Um, Again, just limiting it to the normals. I'm noticing this is a continuous boost. I can't get my freebie, put it into play on the really, really expensive boost I have over here that I'm sure we'll
Yeah.
talk about in a second. But I'll take a light, I'll take a one force ultra boost. Those are that's a pretty good discount.
Yep.
Okay. Makes sense.
All right. So I'm a Repel Leap hater. This boost is too expensive for me to usually play, but it does have a lot of great properties. I'm going to translate this boost into English because it's kind of templated in an odd way. When you are in the corner, when you're at the edge of the arena, you can play this boost, and it is move up to 8 and strike. Your ability is active and applies to everything. So rather than your ability being your specials and ultra attacks have +2 power when you set your attack in the edge of the arena, it is whatever side you're on. So move up to 8, +2 power, now strike. Move up to 8, +3 power, +1 speed, now strike, is how you can read this, depending on which side you're in.
Whoa.
Does that make sense? Yeah,
Yeah.
whoa. There's
And
a reason
and
this is a 2-force boost.
and also it applies to your normals.
And it applies to your normals.
And you're a hater of this boost?
Yeah.
That's is that how tight Vega's resources are? That something like that is really, really, really scary to play?
Look, man, I already mentioned the Vega Quadrangle. I know what I'm choosing, and my resource management abilities are good enough that I actually can be greedy and choose 3.
And you still aren't, and one of them isn't Repel Leap.
Yeah. I don't want to have to pay more for this than I have to, but then I have to dip into my gauge. I want to spend my gauge on doing other things that are awesome.
Wow, okay. So like that's one of the most ridiculous boosts I've ever heard of.
Yeah.
It is requiring like a little bit of a brain reset to be like, probably don't play it.
You viewer and also you Gearface should probably consider playing Repel Leap more than I do. I have gotten to where I am of this is the least compelling option to spend Vega's resources on through playing the character quite a few times.
Okay.
But this boost is really good. This boost is obviously really good, and it does a lot
Right.
of really cool things for the character because when you're in the corner but you're not actually in a position where your hand is able to leverage, this boost has your back. This boost says whatever your hand does, it works. And if that hand is a hand of normals, sick. Hit the opponent with a 7 power 6 feet assault instead of whatever Vega cards you got going on.
Okay. Okay. So there are times, and I mean, if we're thinking about it in terms of you get one or two payouts, and this is comparable to an ultra. I mean, yeah, it that sounds like an ultra to me. Um, I don't think of every single ultra as being a must play for every character in Exceed. Like,
Yeah.
Exceed is a game about choosing between many cool things you can do.
Yep.
Um,
And especially for a character like Vega, that is the name of the game is choosing the cool things that you are allowing yourself to do because your resources are very tight for all the things that you care about.
Okay. So is one of, and I'm sure I know we're going to get to it in a second. Is one of the quadrants on this quadrangle just repel leap?
Close. It's force upkeep because you may know that we have quite a few force costs that we can spend. We can afford to play some amount of force upkeep by default, but the force upkeep is force upkeep that dips into our gauge. The
Okay,
quadrangle is entirely about how we're spending our gauge.
got it. Okay,
And
and
Repel Leap, because it is a 2 force boost, and our ultras are spoilers, the dumbest things on the planet, um, is a boost that is going to be very hard for us to play and pay from hands, which means it is by default a boost that requires us to dip into our gauge.
okay, and is the reason that it's so difficult to pay from hand just that hey, that's a lot of force, and I'm not going to have a lot of card draw, or is it more about I do need to be keeping my mix up options alive, so paying from hand is kind of prohibitive?
Well, let's answer that by talking about these ultras. Finally,
Okay.
here's why Vega doesn't like spending 2 force. Here are quite possibly the silliest ultras ever printed. Here is a card that is 1/2. 4 is a lie. This card hits for 7 or 8 or 9 or 10.
10 on
And if
curve.
it hits for 10, it is also a Dragon Punch, which is why I said range 2 has some awkwardness. You probably want range 3. Because if you give range 2, you're giving him Bloody High Claw. And Bloody High Claw is the only card in Vega's entire kit which gives him whatever positioning he wants. And that means he is going to go from this position, if you aggress into him and he is in Exceed mode, and he defends with his 10 power Dragon Punch, he goes, okay, my 10 power Dragon Punch hits you, probably stuns you, and now you're going to eat 10 again, bozo.
Yeah, that's game losing.
Yep.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I don't think 10 power Dragon Punch.
10 power Dragon Punch.
I'm searching the database. Like, maybe this isn't like Raijin Oath strong, but this is really, really strong.
I honestly think that it competes. Obviously, like I'm rating it as this, but I can get into Exceed mode and play this Ultra. I've done it.
Right.
I do it a decent amount. It requires a commitment, but you can do it.
Okay. All right. So now the lead into this is why you aren't spending 2 force, because you'll dip into your gauge. If what Repel Leap is competing with is this, I understand.
Yeah, now let's talk about the other Ultra, because it's no less silly. Here is a 1/2 9/4 or a 1/2 10/5 before close 3, so 1/5.
God.
Hit the opponent discards 3 cards at random.
Oh.
We haven't talked about Marathi yet, but Marathi has an Ultra that is very similar to this. So oftentimes you'll see people call this Ultra God of War, similar to Bison's.
Yeah.
This is the much grosser of the 2 God of Wars that were given birth to in Street Fighter, which is the other one is on M. Bison.
Yeah, notable ultra payout character M. Bison. Yeah, that's incredibly messed up. Both of these are incredibly messed up.
Gauge, by the way, for this one as well.
Yeah, that's too cheap to be hitting as hard as it hits.
And like, even outside of the corner, this is still a cross that has hit move up to 8. That's not a bad worst case. And this is a dive that hits for 7 and has hits sweep 3 on it. Even outside of the corner, these cards are absolutely insane. That's like the actual 3 gauge version of these. Is just the printed stats and in effects on them.
If Vega's character ability was blank, these should cost 3 gauge.
So like these cards are wild. And because Vega is a character that refuses to have anything be easy, they also have really dumb boosts on them.
Okay. Tell me about these boosts, because I'm still sort of coming down from the high of hearing about the attacks. I cannot imagine what could compete with these. Oh, never mind. This is a force rebate, isn't it? If your attacks are critical, or a gauge rebate if your attacks are critical.
It is allowing you the option to spend either from gauge or from hand to keep your attacks critical. And we've already seen how really, really, really silly our crits are on these 4 attacks that have crits on them. They're +2 power, +2 power, +2 speed, +2 armor, +2 of stats, and the relevant stats for the cards.
Right. Yeah. I mean, we've talked before about some characters like Ken, who are using their crits, like they can crit so freely that they're crit bluffing, right? And their crits can be very relevant. Sometimes they're slightly less so. Vega's crits are doing a lot of work to make his attacks like they're probably playable without them if you're in the corner in your setup, but like they're increasing the value of them dramatically.
Yeah.
Okay. Man, why does it have to be so good though? Because I really want to play this Ultra. So
and plus range also has a lot of funny properties as well, because it makes this trio 1 to 5, and then it makes this attack hit at 5, and then it makes this attack hit at
all ranges.
7.
Yeah.
Effectively, range it's 1 to 7.
Okay, so that's really, really good. Cleanup: if you are not stunned, you may spend.
There's the force upkeep is both of these are equipment boosts. They represent equipment from the game, and this is a recurring style of boost that started mostly in Street Fighter.
Yeah,
and then
it's
continued
like
on
the,
into
it's
other
like the
sequences.
shades, right?
Yeah. Shades doesn't
Okay.
have an upkeep cost. A lot of later ones have upkeep costs because upkeep costs keep them more fair. Um, Now, notably, these have upkeep costs. It's hard to describe a semi-permanent plus range boost that just requires you to not be stunned as being all that fair, but it's a thing.
Yeah. So so when you have this, when you're committing to this, it's possible to play deliberately to not be stunned, right? Like this is a thing that people do all the time in Exceed. You don't have a ton of guard on your attacks with one very notable, very hard to stun exception, but you've got normals. You can probably make this happen if you need to. When these equipment boosts check stun, they do check reactively, right? Like I know from the
That
Guile
is,
lesson that you can run into a stun immune attack with your 9 power, whatever you did, and then your opponent hits you back and stuns you. Um,
yeah, that can happen.
and you'll lose this then.
Yep.
Okay. Um, so we can avoid that, right? We can play to not be stunned. That's a thing that we can do. But then if we do that, the privilege we get is the opportunity to spend force that we don't want to spend.
Yep.
How long and how like this isn't shades, right? I'm not trying to keep this up forever. Unless I am, I don't know. I'm learning here. But how long am I trying to maintain this? As long as they'll let me or as long as my force can maintain it?
Um, the answer is going to differ player to player. There are some players that definitely try to maintain something like this is what claw, yeah, claw, close to forever, but that requires a lot of like literal doing the prepare action to draw cards
Hmm,
to keep your force economy up.
sure.
I don't normally like playing like that. So like this is another thing where oftentimes these will fall. So like I would say that like if you get like 2 or 3 strikes worth of value out of these, you've gotten more than your money's worth, even with the accounting for the force that you're spending on them. Any more than that, and you're riding high, and also the opponent's probably dead.
Right. Yeah, there's not going to be that many strikes in the game if your crits are that strong.
Yeah,
So when I'm sorry, I keep skipping back to the quadrangle here. One of the points on it is force upkeep. I assume another one is crit, right?
you're absolutely correct that another one is crits.
Okay. So when I'm using this, am I kind of trading one force cost for another? Because my attacks are critical. Cool, I get this for free. But now I'm digging into my force upkeep side of the quadrangle a little bit more. Is that kind of how this dynamic works?
Yeah, pretty much.
Okay. Interesting. And I guess, I mean, like broadly, that's how resource management works in general, that you are trading one resource for another. Um, you're spending gauge as force. Like this is a dynamic that is not new in Exceed, so this isn't a super strange concept. But in general, this is really, really strong. I'm losing something really, really strong when I'm playing it. This just sounds
Notably,
like
it's also a one force ultra boost, which means you also have to pay upfront commitment to play it, which makes it a little awkward as well.
okay, yeah. So is this just tech bait then, or is this something that my opponent will think that I'm gonna? How do I put this? Will my opponent tech this, or will they let me spend the force to tech it myself?
Um, well, we've looked at pretty much every boost, and you can see that the only continuous boosts that Vega has, aside from normals, are these 2 ultra boosts.
Right,
If Vega is playing Claw, you should probably tech it, because it's the most crippling thing for you to tech immediately. If he wants it back, he can get it back, but he at least has to spend more things to get it back if that's the case.
right. He's got retrieve.
So, like, at some point, if he wants it, you will have to deal with it.
Okay.
That is just the name of the Vega game, is you're going to have to deal with a sick boost setup that he has established for himself at some point.
Sure. Yeah, that makes sense. And I mean, again, like your attacks are critical is awesome. Plus one range is awesome. Both together on a character like Vega who is doing these really scary things is awesome. The only mitigating factor, it sounds like, is the force cost.
Yeah, pretty much.
Okay.
And like that force cost is genuinely crippling if
Right.
the opponent is pressuring you, right? Because you're giving yourself more gaps with which they can pressure.
Right. Oh, sure. Yeah. And I'm if my opponent is dictating the terms of the strike, I have worse odds of being able to avoid the stun in the first place. I won't even have an opportunity to pay the force cost if I let them just run away with the strike. Okay. And then skipping ahead a little bit, Mask at least has similar dynamics. There's a similar force cost as the cleanup thing. How do we
Yeah,
rate that one?
this one is easier to play because it doesn't have a force cost to play it in the first place.
Okay.
I actually often personally play this one as more of a neutral tool where, like, spoilers. My game plan with Vega is brawl at range 1 until I actually build up enough resources that I can start actually caring about positioning. Um, so when you're playing as like a weird grappler with this kit, having +1 power and +1 armor is really great when your primary tools that you're going to be actually relying on in those situations are, these really cool slows that
They really love
everybody
bonus
has.
power and armor.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. So,
Uh, it
interesting.
also can act as sort of a pressure extender because, like, pushing all these numbers up by 1 does some really funny things to them, especially in exceed mode. These now hit for 7.
Yeah, we found our break point. Um, so if I need it in the early game to get to when I can actually start affording really scary things to throw, this has my back. If I didn't need to spend it as that, and I'm not using it as this terrifying command grab in the late game, it'll make all of those scary things I'm doing even scarier.
Yeah, pretty much.
Okay.
The funny thing about this boost is that because of how our kit is shaped, we actually don't often get the full value of this. Because, like, for most of our actual kit, it basically is just +1 power, unless we lost the strike, in which case
It's
we
only
lost
plus
it
one
by
armor.
very slightly less.
Yeah. Yeah, and hope, and maybe if we really played our cards wrong, but not that wrong, it has allowed us to not be stunned, so we can then pay the upkeep.
So, like, yeah, yeah. Oftentimes this one is like you're basically just be weighing it as do I want to spend a force for sustaining +1 power? And sometimes the answer is yes. I usually don't sustain this for more than like a turn, but like 2 turns of mask is pretty good if you're actually getting decent value out of it on the 2 turns that you get it.
Okay, interesting. All right, so and you sort of you gave me a spoiler warning. I did hear the stuff you said, unfortunately, so I've been spoiled. You play him as kind of a grappler who is hugging range 1 until it's time to go to your favorite range and absolutely kill the opponent.
Yep,
Um, that sounds like another reason why you're not getting your ability super often, because you're not even trying to for most of the game.
yep. I
It's
don't
a
think there's much reason to commit resources and time to playing for it until it's actually worth playing for, which is when you're in exceed mode for me.
You're in exceed mode. You have a couple of like bone crushing strikes, and those might be with claw, they might be with mask, they might be super long range, they might be just mashing pounce from the corner or something. But the the actual the actual win condition for you is and not an overage of resources, but like a critical mass of resources, it sounds like.
Yeah, pretty
Okay.
much.
How are you how are you building those resources? Like I know you said you are going to range 1 to brawl while you build them. Are you just changing cards and prepping a lot?
Uh, mostly playing a pretty normal, literally normal, as in leaning on normals. Game of Exceed. Vega beats almost everyone in the game by default at range. So what's the opponent going to do? Run away? No, we're going to brawl in melee.
Oh, build resources as in build gauge. Because you've said a
Build
couple
gauge.
times that's what we're actually going for. I'm thinking resources like where's my card draw? Where's my hand management stuff? But when you say resources, we're looking for payouts.
Yeah, and
Okay.
as far as like, where's my card draw? Here's your card draw. You leave. The opponent gives you another turn. You can prep.
Okay.
You
Sure.
you set up the corner. The opponent is scared. If they don't react with something where you need to strike, you can prep.
So I
You set up a boost. The opponent, if they don't like immediately threaten your position, you can prep.
so
Like
I get
there's how you can generate resources in terms of like hand advantage is forcing the opponent into a situation where they need to react to something, and that buys you time.
I can convert positioning into damage because I have what is printed on my character card. I can also convert. I can convert positioning into damage, or I can convert positioning into resources. Both of those things are animated by how scary this character card is.
Yep.
Okay.
And that's also part of why I want it to be as scary as possible as soon as possible.
Oh, okay. So you exceed. Now your opponent has gone from scared to terrified when you get to the corner. They are more likely to boost or do something or not attack you. You have more time to prep. You can like assuage the pain on your economy a little bit more effectively by paying up front for it.
Yeah, and also like when you have this excessive amount of stats, it is much harder for the opponent to do something meaningful that they actually will be able to stop you from playing the game.
Right.
Because like, Scarlet Terror solves all sins as far as that goes. Because
What
like
do they
they
what
boost
do they do
light,
to this? Yeah.
you have a 1 to 4 speed 7 attack.
Yeah, and so
They run away. You have these two cards. That it's hard for them to set a position where they aren't still within your reach, at least.
yeah, I mean with even with a pretty good boost down, there are not many cards, maybe there are no cards that cover all of these. Or or
Yeah.
or even that cover like these two, to be honest with you.
The only cards I can think of that would enable you to do that would be something that is like speed 8 and also has a movement effect that does not require you to hit. So like Chips Enough could construct a strike that covers all of these.
Okay.
Most other characters probably can't.
Right. Okay. And then in that matchup, maybe you're leaning a little bit more heavily on confirming with range on Claw or something. Um
Or something, I don't know.
or
I've never played that matchup if I'm being honest, but I don't think Chip likes dealing with this card.
yeah,
So
that's fair. I can see
you're probably
why.
chilling.
Big old consistent thing. So but you are creating such a messed up threat that your opponent actually needs to probably take more than just one turn to match it. And that's an
Yeah.
opportunity to build your resources, your hand resources back up.
Yep. And also like sometimes you can just say, I am a late game character, I am the control. It is up to you to pressure me. I don't feel pressured right now, prep, like at range 1 or something.
Okay.
Because
You
you do so much damage that it doesn't matter if you're down by like I don't know, 20 life, because if you hit the opponent 3 times for 10 and they can't answer it, it doesn't really matter if you started at 10 life or 30.
okay. And so in again to I'm catching up to what you said a while ago. In the early game, your goal is resources. It is not keeping parity in life or something like that. Like you don't actually care that much. If you
Pretty
can
much not at all.
if you can reliably make that damage back up later.
Yep.
Got it. And you can. It sounds like. Okay.
Yep.
So that's the kit. Um it sounds like some of the resource decisions that I'm making in terms of like is this card a boost or is it an attack are kind of like they're not the hardest of all time, but my like for example wall leap versus flying Barcelona, you and high jump versus rolling crystal flesh, we actually do have some recommendations on how to use those attacks or use those boosts
Also,
sometimes.
the use cases for a lot of these are going to be pretty unambiguous and aren't going to clash with the attacks. The
Sure.
relevant consideration is the cost of playing one side versus the other, and also the cost of playing something that has like a force cost, if that is also the case.
Totally.
More so than like, oh, when am I supposed to play this versus playing this?
So when we say that Vega has really, really, really difficult resource management, it's partially that his individual cards with their 75% attack, 25% boost printed on them that's a difficult decision. But it's mostly the overall engine that we're trying to keep from falling apart that
Yeah,
is making this so hard.
and
It's not this versus uh this, right? It's this versus this.
Yeah, and like building positioning, and then also spending a lot of money on payouts is just like a difficult thing to actually manage while also not like wrecking your economy. It actually is like pretty relevant that this character has so many positioning tools for that reason. And I guess like now that we've done an overview of all of the kit and talked about why all of it is really badass and awesome, let's like actually talk about the quadrangle.
Yeah, please.
So as mentioned,
I need to know about this constellation.
the concept is very simple. It's you are Vega, you are this star right here, and you have four main things you're going to be spending your gauge on, and gauge is your lifeblood. One is crits. Here's a nice representative of crits. Another is ultras. Here's a nice representative of ultras. Another is force upkeep. Here's a nice representative of that. There we go. And then the last is, of course, your exceed mode. You really
Okay.
want all of these. It is literally impossible to get all of these because there's clashing like option management choices to be made here, and also you just
If
simply
I
don't have enough resources to do all of these.
and also my opponent doesn't have enough life for me to have all of these successfully. Like if I get all of these, the game's over twice.
Yeah, pretty much.
Okay.
So you are going to probably have to choose two of these for making the character like playable. And then once you grow in skill with the player, you might be able to manage a third with with reasonable presence.
Okay.
So oftentimes when I'm playing the character, the simplest like version of my game plan is get to exceed mode as soon as possible, and then build the resources while also managing my positioning such that um, my exceed mode is relevant when I need it to be, which also is going to be in combination with crits, and end the game with an ultra.
Okay. So you are good enough at managing Vega's economy that you can afford three with some work. You're not really going to be dipping into force costs, force upkeep very often.
Yeah, the way that I play Mask and Claw is this boost is 1 or 2 turns. This boost is exactly 1 turn, and I
Okay.
don't actually plan on keeping these up for much longer than that.
Okay. And obviously there is still a conflict between these two sides of the quadrangle because these are ultra boosted and this is an ultra attack. But
Yep.
first of all, you're not spending the gauge uh, on the force cost. Period. If well, yeah, I mean, period. If you're not sustaining them, and you probably only need to hit with one ultra, and you're only going to be able to hit with one ultra.
Yep.
Okay. When we
And as
talk,
far as crits go, the other like secret sauce here is that you don't actually need your crits for more than like 3 or 4 strikes out of the game. So like, oh yeah, just like set aside 3 or 4 gauge worth of crits aside is like still an ask, but like you can probably manage it if you go into the game knowing like, okay, I will need to play like somewhere between 2 and 4 crits, and like that means in addition to my exceed mode, like that I need to build this much gauge. I have like these gauge tools, and also like because of the way Vega works, we can actually like do some funny things that other characters don't necessarily have the opportunity to do, as far as like actually building to the thresholds we need to build to, while also like having everything be meaningful.
right, sure. And if I play 5 or 6 crits over the course of a game, I probably can't do this anymore, or I probably can't
That is
do this any. Ooh, oh god, I probably can't do
that
this
is
anymore.
that is correct, and that is also why I am recommending uh, that you choose two rather
Right.
than trying to stretch yourself to three.
Right. Sure, that makes sense. Just like to define our terms here, I think you mentioned this as like when we say force upkeep. First of all, we're specifically talking about gauge. But there are other representatives of force upkeep besides these boosts. Anything else that costs a force to play, any of these things could come from gauge. Are we extending that over to change cards in the move action, like universal game actions that could be spent from gauge? That is
In
also
my
force upkeep.
Yes, in my experience, Vega only needs to walk about once or twice, and CC is you're basically hard committing to not playing an ultra if you CC. Like you're either not playing an ultra or you're not exceeding if you're CCing, because
If
you would
you're
have to
CC,
spend your gauge for that to be meaningful.
okay. So unless
Like
you
you'd
have
have to spend gauge or spend your ultras as 2/4s, and
right,
that's
unless
like a tall order.
that's still tough. Unless you have like the worst hand of all time, and you are willing to pitch the hand and get a new one. But
Yeah, which it's worth noting. Exceed being a game with a deck forces you to employ a mixed strategy, which means that it's hard to play the same line every single game. And to that end, there are games where I'm like, okay, well, actually, I need this. And that's the nice thing is Vega's resource management decisions. A couple of them are in giant chunks, but other ones are smaller. The force
yeah,
upkeep and the crits, those are one by one by one. So like if you just need so many one by one decisions just as part of playing the game and like maintaining meaningful threat, you can just be like, well, I guess I'm not exceeding or I'm not playing an ultra this game. You don't need
right,
to full commit to those.
right. The decision is kind of made for you by the game state that you found yourself in. So you can focus on what you need in the moment, and then if you look and you say, "Oh wow, I needed a whole lot of that in the moment. Maybe I can't afford the thing I wanted to do anymore. So let's change the strategy." So economically, when you're talking about changing cards as a commitment that you probably can't afford if you're preferring to run your game plan, how are you are like so you sort of already answered this that you are getting to your exceed mode and that's how you're going to be preparing a few times a game. So you won't change cards at all if you can help it with Vega.
Very rarely, yeah, because all of these specials are gas. They're bullets. If I'm CCing these away, I'm committing to my ability not doing anything.
Right. And you
Which means
and you
the only other
need your
thing I would want
normals
to
for the
CC,
rest of the time.
yeah, the only other things I would want to CC are normals, and it's like this is positioning. This is a lot of meaningful positioning. This is positioning, and also like assault is still like a pretty decent card if you're playing like repel leap strats.
Sure.
Um, Dive is funny, but also like you're a Street Fighter character. Street Fighter characters have scary boosts. You probably need tech for
Right.
like a lot of matchups, and if you don't, then like cool, dive is force, I guess.
Because you have
Spike has like
every other card you have is dive.
yeah, Spike actually has really funny properties because we're Vega, which is that this maintains positioning while also covering the things that the opponent might be playing against if we're at range 3.
Oh,
So
sure.
like Spike is actually pretty good when we're cornered and the opponent is at range 3 to just throw out because unlike a lot of other characters, maintaining that positioning is actually really good for us.
Right. And a lot of times like Spike represents the more threatening side of a mix up because I mean like the assault versus Spike classic range 3 mix up, putting aside the fact that this gains you advantage and that's awesome. 5 is more than 4. Like
5 is more than 4, that is true.
if that is the extent that you are weighing these cards, this one is the scarier card to get hit by. But like Spike is actually the like so my point in saying that is that an opponent will often play against the Spike instead of the assault, for example. My my opponent cannot make that evaluation about Spike when these are the things that I could hit them with.
Yep.
These are all scarier, so this actually becomes like a fairly consistent thing I can throw out.
Yep.
Okay.
Uh, and as mentioned, like we are pretty reliant on slows for being slows in our early game for building gauge, and block is actually Vega's best opener.
Really? Offensive block? Just to get gauge?
Yeah, and also it doesn't move you in.
Right. Okay. But okay, no, when I see it. All right. I was getting confused. I was getting confused about in the early game you want to move in to brawl with normals, but your opponent's actually going to do that part for you because they don't want you to be at range.
They will often do that for you. Yeah.
Okay, so you block early, get gauge. Maybe they fast dived in or something, or they swept and you ate their sweep. Awesome. On their turn, they are too afraid of all the stuff you can do when you have space. They'll move in, and you're like, awesome. I have a hand to sweep and focus. Let's fight.
Yeah, pretty much. And also, like, if you open with block, you have gauge now, which means your mix up is live.
You have crits, right?
So like
Okay.
the opponent really needs to move in.
Okay, and that saves you force, it saves you boost. You don't have to do anything. You are exerting threat by being far away. You are exerting even more threat because if you, from opening positions, if you really, really want to, as you mentioned, you can dance or step, or maybe more relevantly, your opponent knows that you might dance or step, even if you never want to do it.
Yeah.
So they need to chase you down. They need to fight you in the center of the arena, basically.
Yeah, pretty much.
Okay, so then we employ these. We employ pounce. We build some gauge. We get to 3 gauge and flip. Um, and then once we've done that, we can we still need to build more resources to really finish out the game. And as we're building those resources, you said that you're managing your position. What does that
Yep.
mean for Vega? Like, does that mean that you are going to the corner and threatening something? Does that mean that you are always within one turn from the corner?
Uh, if there's something I want to threaten, I take the corner. I will say that even if you're in basic mode, if you find a good opportunity to play high jump or retrieve and it gives you the corner, it's probably worth doing. Like
Okay.
these are just good to play. And these are also part of building resources. We don't just need to play normals. We can also play these
Oh, sure.
as part of that game plan. Um, like yeah, like you can just think of it as you mentioned earlier as a boost. When you want to boost your "I am big and scary now" button, you boost your "I am big and scary now" button, and then you ask the opponent, "Now what?"
Right.
And then however they respond, you respond accordingly. Um, you have a stable defensive button if they decide that they want to force you to play it. So, like, a part of keeping the opponent honest is going to be playing stuff like Scarlet Terror or Crit. But like,
So
it's not like it's bad.
right, sure, yeah. It's merely uh this 6 speed 5 power attack in the corner in exceed or not in basic mode. Like you can do worse, clearly. Um, so I've reached my minimum threshold to exceed. I've exceeded. I've done all that stuff. As I build more resources, at this point, for you personally, because you love exceeding, and then everything else is kind of like you'll find it in the moment, preferring to go with a couple crits and some ultras.
Yeah, yeah.
Um,
Preferring to build two and ultra,
are
ideally.
you specifically looking at Bloody High Claw as your ultra payout, or will you take what you can get?
I'll take either. Both of these are kick ass. It's a little bit easier to play Splendid Claw EX, which is useful because it's a lot harder to beat if it's speed 6.
Yep,
But like, yeah, there's just a little bit less pressure on this one. There's more pressure on this one because Claw is a really useful neutral tool, even for like one strike.
one strike, sure.
Um, so like, it is very difficult to actually play this EX. Luckily, you don't actually need to very often. Um,
This one you
also,
legitimately could.
you legitimately could, and also it's also like pretty fine if you don't play EX. Um, I don't remember the exact setup. Is it here? Yeah. So yeah. Anyways, I'm calculating out repel leap setups right now.
Okay,
You could do some really funny repel leap setups with Splendid Claw, which you probably if you think out the positions that I was just building out, and then think about and then I play Splendid Claw, you can probably figure out what I was checking for, which is if the opponent can cross out of those setups.
sure. Right, yeah. So and that uh
And the answer is no if you set up the positioning right.
right, and the big upside of, other than more damage, the big upside of EXing it is that they wouldn't be able to cross out of it. If you play repel leap right, it doesn't matter anyway.
Yeah, pretty
Okay,
much.
cool. That makes sense. Our ultra payout of choice, ideally EX Splendid Claw, but you can probably make something else work.
Or
Um,
Bloody High Claw, especially on defense, because like this having effectively hit gain advantage on it means that this is like basically a 20 power attack.
oh yeah, you're right. Okay, yeah, I keep forgetting. Like, every card I look at means I'm not looking at the other card, and I forget how messed up it is.
Yeah, it's great.
Yeah,
I love Vega.
it's crazy. Okay, so I'm building to my exceed mode. I flip. I'm building again. At that point, you've done the blue certified sure thing, the thing that you will always do if you can do it. You've exceeded. At that point, is it a little bit more free in terms of your decision making? Are you at that point more willing to find what you need in the moment and sort of freestyle, or are you still kind of not rigidly, that's wrong, but like, are you heavily prioritizing your preferred payout down here even after you've exceeded?
Um, the first thing to drop if something needs to drop is definitely the ultra payout. Even like I'll put it this way: if you set any exceed character on the table and you tell them that their objective is to get to 3 gauge, they will be able to get to 3 gauge in some way, just with like normals and whatever garbage specials that you give them.
Sure.
You could give them literally the worst cards in the game, and they probably would still be able to get to 3 gauge
Yeah.
and do it reasonably consistently and reasonably fast.
Like,
So there
block
isn't
high
actually
jump.
much.
You
Yeah,
did it.
yeah. There isn't actually much rigidity even before you exceed, because your goal is just to build to like 4 gauge and then flip. And then like you actually like start caring about Vega specific things. But like
Right.
even before that, like if you find an opportunity where it's reasonable to do Vega things, TM, and like it isn't going to completely destroy your economy to do it, then it's probably reasonable to do it.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, and again, like something that it has come up multiple times, but is worth reiterating as we talk about all this stuff. You don't actually need to do it very often because of how strong it is.
Yep.
Like, like you are not looking for a self-sustaining perpetual motion device engine that sometimes comes up in like a seventh cross character. Like Vega is like, he's here for a good time, not for a long time. Like, you are burning yourself out doing this, but what are they going to do to stop you? You are going to run them over if you get your way.
Yep.
Okay, that'll make sense. And the Vega specific things that you're talking about, that turns on in the exceed mode, not because you have a resource overage, but because now that you've exceeded, the cost of doing those things is now justified. Correct?
Yeah.
Okay, that makes sense.
And like I guess to like quickly run over like a line that leans less into the exceed mode and more into the other things. Uh, your Vega, you can probably build like to 6 gauge pretty reasonably throughout any given game, because most characters can. Like that is
Yeah.
actually a pretty reasonable minimum baseline. So like let's talk about like the cool things you can do if you don't exceed. You can play 2 ultras. You can sustain claw for like 4 turns and just play a bunch of cool crit mix-ups. You can play more. You can lean more into just throwing 50/50s at the opponent. Like those are all like pretty cool things you can do, and also means that the character can have a lot more upfront pressure if you're fine with sacrificing a much more deadly and also much more secure end game.
Okay. Yeah, the value proposition there is that there's a decent chance you won't really need an end game because you're deciding when the end game is happening because you're actively killing your opponent.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. So, and you personally aren't choosing that one because you think that the upside on the exceed mode is higher, and also does it just like kind of fit your playstyle better? Or is it mostly just like a value proposition judgment that you're making?
So the way that I like taught myself Vega, because like for a while I didn't understand the character, and then like it all clicked, was I was like, oh, Vega is just a Red Horizon character,
Ooh.
and like Red Horizon characters, they by and large want to exceed ASAP, and then oftentimes they will kill you with an ultra that is very difficult to stop because it is for some reason 3 gauge when it should actually be 4 gauge.
Yeah.
You might be seeing the parallels.
Yeah, no, I can. Earlier when I said like I mentioned Rygenoth, and you said it's competitive, and I was like, oh, okay, I understand what we're talking about now. Um, yeah, I mean that's a Melian Ultra for people who have not seen that particular lesson. It's messed up. It's a 10 gauge or 10 damage ignore armor at range 4 at speed 6.
Yep, speed 6.
That's a Red Horizon Ultra. They're unstoppable much of the time. Vega has that dynamic.
Yeah, so like I think of Vega as a Red Horizon character um with like a little bit of Blaze Blue in him. So I'm going to play him a lot like a Red Horizon character. And then the parts of him that are more Blaze Bluey, where it's like, yeah, like my resource management is like ass.
Right.
Well, not my resource management. My
The
resource
characters. Yeah.
demands, yeah, are ass. So I need to just like make awful decisions related to that. Also, are like kind of true in Red Horizon as well. Most of those characters have really trash economy.
Right. They have the upside of being able to. They have like dedicated force cards, though. They have cards that they're like, well, I mean, I need to spend force, and I do have this copy of Rolling Ankle Grab right here.
That is true. They
And
do. Vega
Vega
doesn't have
doesn't
that.
have that privilege.
That is where Vega turns more into a Blaze Blue character than a Red Horizon character.
Got it. Okay. So, all right. That's the kit. That's the overall game plan. That's the cool quadrangle. We've sort of covered the normals. Like it sounds like the normals are for everything else. When we don't have an opportunity to do Vega things, the normals are how we're going to make any sort of progress at all on our opponent's life bar. Because it seems like
Yep.
when these cards, with a couple exceptions like Pounce, when these cards aren't in their best case, they're they're pretty bad. Like
Yeah.
close up rolling crystal flash and a close up flying Barcelona attack are almost not attacks. It seems like.
Yeah. These are like the ones that you don't play in the corner. You may note that two of them are the fast ones. Of course, you play the fast ones when you're not in the corner. They're the fast ones.
Right.
And then the one that has a shitload of guard on it, also you play like the other two are mid speeds. They're payouts. They're the ones that kill the opponent. These also are good at killing the opponent, but you are going to find more opportunities where you need to play these for some reason.
Right.
This one's especially good at range 1 in basic mode with like mask in play, because it turns out you don't actually need to crit it if you're fine with playing a 5 speed or a 5 defense 2 speed attack with 6 power.
On offense, that's honestly good enough. Right? Like
It is often good enough.
that's just fine.
But yeah, like
Okay.
I mentioned it already. Like crossing out, especially if it gets us to the corner, is like an extremely powerful play for Vega because you're not just getting gauge and positioning that's probably better for you than the opponent. You're in a positioning that is better for you than the opponent in like all caps and bolds and underlines.
Right. It
Grasp is a card that is practically guaranteed to hit in most matchups, which means it is a stable source of building gauge. We don't care about trading down. Grasp is a card that we love. Um, when we're in a good position, Fierce is also great because we have a bunch of fast shit that we can use to confirm that power.
so
Like,
same dynamics of like when you're in the corner and you're exceeded, your opponent might occasionally let you prep. If you don't need to prep, or if you value prepping lower than you value fierce, you can just put fierce down.
yeah, and also notably that means that it's another option to pull off a retrieve
Sure.
if we have fast options that we want to threaten off of the position we get set up, which like it's mostly going to be Scarlet Terror as far as that goes, um, because Scarlet Terror is the one that actually hits at range 3 for good speed.
Makes sense.
So Fierce is like a pretty reasonable pull from that position. Assault is hey, you know this boost that reads Retreat 4 on it? It's pretty cool on Vega.
Yeah, I mean, similar dynamics of the all caps, underlined, bolded. Like, if you can get to the position, yeah, it'll do it. But
Yep.
even if you can't, you have options, and probably your opponent doesn't.
Yep. And like Assault is really cool with like Repel Leap, as mentioned.
Right.
Because when you're in Exceed mode, it hits for 7 and it's speed 6. Those are like really difficult stats to answer. So like Assault can be an attack, especially if you have like a good follow up from range 1, which can be as simple as I assault, like I Repel Leap, assaults, and then I high jump or retrieve back into the corner,
Sure.
which is like a pretty brutal offensive sequence. If you can set it up and then like go from 1 gauge to 3 gauge, because then you're threatening an ultra off of that sequence. That means you're spending from hand. But like if you're spending from hand into a sequence where you are in the corners and threatening an ultra, that's fine.
You win.
That's a pretty good use of hand.
Right.
But yeah, like backstep is great on Vega. Assault is a sometimes suit. It also is a fast. Again, we want to build gauge. We don't really care about trading down. Assault is a great card at doing that. Dive is mostly a boost because we are dive men. We're even on dive.
Yeah. No,
It's as dive as we can possibly be.
we're the iconic like platonic ideal of dive.
The next two are not going to surprise you. As mentioned, Spike is a pretty cool mix-up option for us, along with Sweep, because it maintains positioning while also covering some of the things that the opponent might play, expecting like a Scarlet Terror at range 3.
Right.
Which sweep in that mix-up context is the thing that would cover like Sky High Claw, like the opponent defending on curve instead. Um, which like you can like lean into player psychology stuff with Vega to like try to force specific responses out of them. I probably wouldn't do that. They might come up just because you have Claw in play.
Sure. That makes sense.
Uh,
So
so like both
for
these
the
are good
most
because they
part,
maintain positioning.
right? Yeah,
Uh,
and they are reasonable things you can play in the corner that won't get you out of the corner.
yeah, and then also we're a mid speed maestro, and also our mid speeds have big guard or big range, which especially Sky High Claw. So both of these boosts are actually pretty awesome on us as well.
Okay. I'm noticing to my dismay that all of these cards are great, and I can't spend any of them.
That's fine. That's fine because it just means that you're gonna have to choose which ones you want to spend in the moment while you're playing the game. It's a good time.
Because
Reading is bad, but also we're
I
a
do
character
have
that
to
has the
spend
highest
them.
payouts in the game, but also focus is a cool card. You, I think that how you use focus is actually more going to be a personal playstyle thing rather than me telling you how you should be playing focus as Vega. Because I think most people know how they want to play focus.
Yeah, I think so. I think that I mean you can make an argument that if Vega gets one clean hit, he probably wins the game, but you can also make an argument that if you play well, he probably doesn't need Reading's help to get a clean hit.
You're absolutely correct. And also, did you know that Flying Barcelona attack when you're in the corner hits for 10? Did you know that
I
Focus EX has 9 guard, effective guard? Things to
fascinating.
think about. Anyways,
Fascinating.
we
Writes
love Gauge.
down does too much damage.
We love Gauge, so block is actually an attack for us. It also is notably a don't move mix up at like extreme range. So another thing that preserves positioning, and that can be especially useful as an opener. As mentioned, I think that block is low-key Vega's best opener because it's the one that is the hardest for the opponent to actually meaningfully answer.
Sure. Yeah. Outside of like occasional like Yuzu's spike or something like that. Like most people if all you care about is getting Gauge, most people can't stop you from doing that.
Yep.
Okay.
Notably, Yuzu Spike loses to like regular dive or Sky High Claw, which would be the other sides of the mix-up with Rolling Crystal Flash block. But Yuzu Spike is pretty stable as far as defensive options go into Vega initiating a strike at range 4.
And also that like this card doesn't well other than keeping position in the corner, I guess. This card doesn't get better when you've exceeded and all of the other cards you just mentioned do.
Yeah.
So you're not sacrificing a really strong late game card by using this early.
Yep.
Okay.
And like as mentioned, like I mentioned it offhand, but like I oftentimes think of Vega as the control. So like who is the beatdown? There's like
Yeah.
a beatdown and a control.
Yep.
The opponent is usually the beatdown. So preventing the opponent from winning is actually winning as Vega more than it is for a lot of other characters that I play. So like actually legitimately blocking an attack, assuming you have the hand to pay for it afterwards, is like pretty reasonable if you don't want to just empty block. Parry is a sometimes food. It's a sometimes food on like everyone, in my opinion. But like if the opponent has something you can't answer, which I guess can happen, then you can just parry it. But otherwise, like Gauge is of inordinate value to us. It's of so much value to us that I made a funny graphic to talk about how Vega cares about Gauge.
Yeah, we've had a lot of lessons together, and I've had a lot of lessons on the show, and no one has ever uh, resorted to JPEGs to to tell me how important Gauge is. That should tell me something.
But yeah, so like block after add this to your Gauge, hype text, the hypest text that Vega could ever ask for.
Yeah,
So
I mean
block is
that's half of why we're playing high jump.
yeah.
Okay, okay,
It's
and
arguably more than half of why we're playing high jump, and I play high jump a lot because of that.
yeah, that's fair. And to your point, on top of that, what if sometimes we actually block an attack and get value out of it? Oh my god.
Yeah, or like force the opponent to like play sweep, and then they feel like a big dummy because we ate a sweep and they whiffed.
Yeah, no, that is for Vega in particular, that sounds like a huge amount of value. Okay. Man, blue, all of these cards are too good for me to spend and I have to spend all of them.
Yeah. Anyways, some good news is as far as the boosts go, we have retrieve, so like we have a little bit of flexibility as far as like actually playing grasp as an attack and also playing fierce as a boost in the situations we would want it in.
Sure.
That's about the only good news I can give you as far as that
Right,
goes.
yeah. So, well, I mean, the other good news is that sometimes I get this, and sometimes I get this. And I don't actually need very much more if I can manage all of this.
Yeah, yeah. So like the like 50% of the game where you're just playing a really normals heavy basic ass game of Exceed. As long as you're good at doing that, like it's still reasonable. And then after that, you get to kill the opponent's ass dead, and they just like explode into a million giblets. It's sick.
When you're I do really want to explode my opponent into giblets. You're all right, I'm sold now. Blue, when you're setting up this early game, are you mostly mulliganing for normals? I guess like my like at a guess, it's like normals, pounce, high jump or something.
uh, yeah, pretty much. Like as I mentioned, these are the ones that are going to be most consistently relevant when we're in basic mode or outside of the corner. So any of these cards are reasonable to keep. Normals are good, so we keep the normals. Um, it's nice to have like a bit of neutral utility via our ultra boosts. So like if I see those, I might keep those. It really just kind of depends on like what my hand shape is telling me pre-mulligan as far as I like what I would want to be playing for. Because like as mentioned already, Vega like kind of beats most characters at range by default.
Right.
So and like that is true even if we don't crit because we have a 2-speed 4 guard attack that hits 1 to 4, and then also a 5-speed 1 to 6 attack that is a million miles an hour.
Right.
So like don't really need to think too hard about it. Just like sometimes look at what the opponent has and be like, oh, they have these things, which means I care more about these things. And otherwise, like, yeah, I'll probably get in just because like getting in is the thing that Vega does by default with all of his attacks.
Right. Or your opponent will do it for you.
Yeah, or the opponent will do it for you. And then like from there, it's like just how do I build gauge? I love hard mulling for grasp. Please don't reading grasp turn 1. I'll be very sad.
Yeah, you're giving away all your secrets is the problem. That's the curse of the experts on this show.
Very true. Anyways, it's fine because there's like also all these like slows that are reasonable to play as well and cross.
Yeah, and I mean again, mostly normals, a few other options. Probably don't mull for these. If you get these, keep them. So it's a flexible thing, but the the game plan that we're mulliganing for in the early game is normals man with a little bit of utility, not a little bit of like sauce necessarily.
Yeah, pretty much.
It's like
And like
it
that utility can be as simple as like, oh well, I got mask and I got pounce, so like I guess I'm playing pounce with mask, and like oh the opponent initiated into me and they actually have like a thing that can beat a 5 defense 2-speed attack, and I'm afraid of that. Well, I guess I have to crit this. I
right,
guess it delays me by a turn, but that's fine because I'm probably guaranteeing a lot of value by doing this.
right, okay, and that's how we're thinking about it. We're playing that flexibly. But we are sort of eyes on the prize. We're looking to get our gauge come hell or high
Yep.
water. Okay.
Objective build gauge.
And then shortly afterward, objective um uh go to the second game of the set because you just won.
Yeah, pretty much.
Makes sense. Any other strategic considerations you want to go over, or should we talk about counterplay?
Um, don't be afraid to spend like any of the cards because you're gonna have to spend everything at some point. And it's gonna feel bad, but that's just Vega life.
Okay. And it's gonna come from your hand unless you are in like absolutely dire circumstances. That's gonna feel even worse, right? But
If,
it
if you're
cannot
spending
come
from
from your
gauge,
gauge.
if you're spending from gauge, it's because you have made the active decision to spend from gauge for some reason, which means you are like committing your resources to specific things. Because again, Vega Quadrangle,
Right. Pick two.
all these are permissible, but you can only do a couple of these in a game usually.
Right. Makes sense. Okay. So yeah, you'll feel bad. That doesn't mean that it's the wrong decision. Um, spend carefully, but you do have to spend.
Yep.
Okay. All right. So Blue, please. Now that you've put the fear of God into me by telling me about Vega, how do I stop this guy?
Um,
What is his opponent doing to deal with him?
don't let him achieve his win cons without taking a lot of damage first. You can kind of think of it similar to like a character like Arakune, where You have to beat the character in neutral, and outvalue him before he goes into kill mode. Notably with Arcune's kill mode has a timer on it, and Vega's doesn't. Vega's instead is temporary by nature of it requiring positioning that you can't set up very easily.
Right, and
Um,
that as we mentioned, that he moves himself away from by paying out.
yep.
Okay.
So like most of the game isn't actually going to happen with Vega in an extremely advantaged position, and when he is, you probably are just gonna have to hold that shit. Notably, like these are still like kind of mix-ups. Like this one is harder to meaningfully answer because there's 3 points to it. But this one, like even when Vega's in exceed mode, this usually loses to assault. This usually trades with sweep and focus. It trades like a champ into them, but like if Vega is giving up his payout and just trading into focus, that's bad for Vega because he will then have to reset position and do it again. And his options will have dwindled further because he'll probably have to spend a few to get back into the position, let alone then striking to actually take advantage of it. Similar with the Sky High Pounce like Scarlet Terror, this can be answered by crossing out even when he is exceeded.
Right.
I am not going to say that it loses to crossing out because you're Vega, but it
You
does.
would rather your opponent be far away from you anyway.
Yeah, it does maintain position. So if you cross out at like range 3 or range 4, um, and he closes 3, you are at range 3 or range 4, and he is out of the corner. That is
Right.
awkward.
Right.
And then like you can, as similar to Rolling Crystal Flash, you can trade with sweep or focus into this. Um, don't eat this. Pray that you have axe kick so you can just like stun it, I guess.
Right.
But
Yeah.
also like similar to Sky High Claw, like this loses to you, not loses. This is covered by you crossing out.
Okay. So
No,
so
I'm not telling you should be crossing out all the time because if Vega picks up that you're doing that, he can punish you. Uh, the hardest
un-
of any character in the game, arguably,
unbelievably
for
hard.
doing that.
Yeah.
But it does at least mean that like these are mix-up shapes with answers. They are just specific answers.
Right. And I mean these are answers among the normals. I mean, well, pounce aside. Sometimes you need something pretty special to deal with one of these cards,
Yeah,
but for the most part,
and
like you will
like
have something.
within your character kit, you might have something that helps you as well. If you have like Crystal Strike on Jin, a 1/3/5 before close 3, which like a lot of characters have that,
Yep.
or something similar to it. Sky High Claw is suddenly a card that you can actually meaningfully answer, which means now you're playing the is he playing Sky High Claw or is he playing Scarlet Terror? And if so, like which of my cards do I play? Which like that's scary. That does mean which high value card am I playing? Am I playing like Totsugeki on May or am I playing Sweep? But like that is at least a mix-up shape that you can meaningfully answer. Um, Pounce is still Pounce as far as that goes. Like you probably just don't want to eat it. It's like pretty bad to eat that one. Um, you also can block these. Like none of these ignore armor. Obviously, blocking a 10 power attack is like the saddest thing in the universe. But
But he can't afford very many of those. So
yep, he will have
he's
to.
eating the economic loss about as bad as you are, and you aren't dead.
Yep. So that's like in a pinch, if you are just like simply not sure what to do as far as Vega's mix-ups go, setting up a position where he can't threaten ignore armor and then blocking is an option. Um, Obviously, like if you block this, you probably lose still, but like you probably know if he's going to play an ultra from the way he's playing.
Okay.
Um, Aside from that, like because Vega has a lot of things he needs to manage and he has to play in kind of a janky way. Um, there's like a big early game period where he's going to be even more interactive than like his really unfair mix-up shape that he gets late in the game. And like in that position where if you're like winning and winning consistently, then you might be fine to just like continue playing the numbers game. It's just that the health totals will probably you know look a lot closer at the end of the game than they started out as if you are just like beating his ass really hard before he actually gets into a good position.
Right.
Um,
You'll win, but maybe not comfortably. You'll be
yeah,
afraid as you're winning.
Aside from that, like similar to a character like Fight, for example, any character that can be a little expensive, looking for the gaps where Vega just like runs out of steam and has to like start prepping just to like have things to do again,
Right.
and pressuring in those gaps is really great. Um, a season slash character specific tech that can be very useful, although it does not win you the game if you have this. But something like area shift or Taker's ability, those are really useful for denying Vega the ability to have his ability be live. Notably, if Vega is dead set on having his ability exist, no matter how much you pay to stop him from that, you probably are not actually going to stop him from having it forever. And because he only needs it so many times in a game, it's not necessarily sustainable to do it. But like, let's say you're in like this position, but you're actually still a bad guy instead of Ryu. If you area shift him to here and then you strike, Vegas just kind of owns.
Right. So okay, so getting him out of the corner with area shift, or I mean like Tager, notable gauge printing machine Tager, he's going to have about as difficult a time building resources as Vega. Getting him out of the corner is not enough to be meaningful counterplay, but getting him out of the corner and punching him in his stupid face, that's real.
Yeah, that's pretty real.
Okay, so if you're going to get him out of the corner, make it count, because just delaying his payout is not going to be enough to meaningfully stop him.
Yep.
Okay, that makes sense.
And I know it's always like really lame to say like, yeah, like just like call his mix-ups and then also like pray that he like messes up so that you have good opportunities to kill him. But sometimes it be like that. Vega's kind of a dumb character. I'm kind of glad that people don't play him very much, if I'm being honest.
It wouldn't be a blue lesson without at least one instance of IDK just play exceed. There was a lot more like character specific tech, but at some point this guy is throwing mix-ups. Like he is playing an interactive game. You do have the ability to not dictate what he's doing, but have a say in what he's doing.
Yeah, and like if he's dead set on not playing mix-ups, so he like rushes exceed and then he starts boosting, he's like committing a lot of resources to the privilege of not playing mix-ups. Probably just let him have that one payout and like block it. He's invested so much into it that he probably loses the game after that anyways.
Okay. Yeah, because his real life bar is his resources. Okay. So that makes sense. Anything else you wanted to mention, or shall I ask my my final questions and then we can wrap it up?
I think it's really funny that when they were bringing Claw into Exceed, they chose to adapt specifically the Super Turbo version of the character and not like any other version. It's pretty sick.
Well, I mean, it's like Super Turbo versus like SF2 or something. It's gonna
Super
be
Turbo
one
is
of
too.
no, I know, but like it's a specific like delineation of SF2. I
Yeah,
mean, what I mean is like it's going to be one of the iconic ones, right? And some flavor of SF2 is the one that people played. So it makes sense to me that it was going to be one of those. I'm not sure why Super Turbo in particular was chosen, but I'm kind of glad. It sounds like I'm glad they picked that one because they made a cool character out of it.
they did make a very cool character. It's just really funny because like Vega's design history in Street Fighter has basically been he was like a broken motherfucker in Super Turbo, and it was almost entirely off of like looping Oki's MA 50/50s, that were just like insane. And also he just did like a lot of damage and like
Right.
a lot of standard Vega traits. So every other game since he's been fucking ass, with like the exception of like one or two games where he was good because of anomalies, basically.
Hmm.
So he's just been paying for the crimes of being a ludicrous character in SF2 for his entire existence since.
The devs got scared of him is what happened. The devs were cowards.
That's so true. They played against Tokido in the arcades one time, and they were like, "Damn, bro, this Vega character's bullshit."
Yeah, we gotta nerf him for the rest of time. So Blue, my final question. If a intrepid Exceed player has found Vega and has completely fallen in love with him, and is looking for other characters to kind of scratch that itch. You'll pardon the pun. He's got a big claw. Who are they looking for? What other characters have some Vega sauce to them that might appeal to a Vega fan?
All right, so like Vega is pretty unique, so it's really hard to do the clean like check out these characters like I can do with a lot of characters. May I recommend the Red Horizon season and also the Blaze Blue season?
Yeah,
You
I
might
mean,
find stuff that you like there, even if they don't play a lot like Vega necessarily.
given the comparisons you were making, either really big dumb payout ultras and uh, almost mandatory exceed modes, or horrifying resource management, you're going to find something that you like.
Also, check out other SF characters. A lot of them are really fun.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, like you probably won't get exactly Vega, but depending on what you like about Vega, you can probably find it somewhere. It sounds like
Yeah.
makes sense to me. All right.
Oh, also Mole Knight. As you mentioned earlier, Mole Knight does have a similar like play tempo to him, and also has the like ranged presence and mobility traits that Vega has. It's not exactly the same. Again, Vega's a very unique character. Um,
Yeah,
but
I
like
feel like Mole Knight's resource management is not nearly as scary, and
it really isn't.
he seems like when he's exceeded, he's sort of turns up the pressure in a different way, right? Like at least the way that he was taught to me, he goes from being a zoner to being like uh uh a stick and move kind of brawler where he's just constantly popping around.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
Yeah. Okay. So Vega won't do that, but Vega will have that sort of payout zoner lifestyle that might appeal to you.
Yeah.
Um, cool. Well, Blue, this has been awesome. I have learned, I believe, everything there is to know about Vega, and I am now ready to go out and completely just get destroyed when I next try to play him. Um, that's actually
Decent
something that we
chance
should.
it'll happen.
That's actually something that we should probably mention to people who are watching this before I wrap this up. By reputation, with Blue telling me this stuff, this character's really hard. Um, I've heard the best players I know talk about how difficult to play Vega is. Blue among them. Don't stress out about that. Like, you'll take some losses if you pick this character up. He seems really, really hard. Don't get discouraged. It's okay. It's going to be part. There's no training wheels to this character, and it's going to be part of getting better with him. That you're just probably going to lose a few times, and that's okay.
Just keep your eyes on the light at the end of the tunnel. Having actual 3 gauge things that are just like so ludicrous.
Yeah. What if like yeah if you get up early and do your push-ups and eat your Wheaties, you too will be able to play Splendid Claw in Exceed mode, and it'll be great.
It'll be so awesome.
Well, Blue, thank you so much. This has been awesome. Really, really appreciate your time. Thank you so much. Looking forward to the
As
next
always.
one. Yeah, it's
Hell
been
yeah.
great. Folks at home, I hope you learned something. I hope you had fun too. I apologize for me sleepwalking through this lesson. It's been a long day. Blue, thank you for putting up with my nonsense.
No, it
It
was great.
was a good time. I will see you all for the next one. Goodbye, everybody.
Bye. See y'all.